So Randy, why don't we dive in? Just do a quick tour and see if I see friendly president faces. There's too many of us. Oh my goodness. I'm going to assume we're all here. Well, look, thank you everyone for getting up this morning and joining us in what I hope will be an exciting launch of an exciting journey. I'll just a few remarks and then dive into the deck. I did not actually, when I went to bed at 3, I did not actually expect to get up feeling desperately inspired. But funnily enough, I did, and I just want to say why. It's so interesting because if you pour over the, still incoming results, you see how profoundly divided our nation really is, and really in need of rebuilding, trying to reestablish, to look forward, to do something new. It's actually probably, and it's not a political comment or intended to reveal a political orientation, but it is clear that what we're doing is not working as a country, and the risks to all of us are actually quite profound. And it seemed fitting, to be perfectly honest, to be coming into this conversation, which is about building something new. In the interest of our students, obviously, and the communities that they come from and the communities that we serve. But I think there's a broader purpose. I'd like to think there's a broader purpose. So I'm going to spend a little time trying to go through the planning process and our expectations of you. I want to begin by saying thank you. This is not going to be a light lift, and I'm going to keep a watch on faces on my Hollywood squares, and I'll dial back if anyone's looking desperately horrified as we go through some of the slides. This is intended to be a dialogue, not a lecture, so please just interrupt. I have all the baggage of being a historian, so I can sort of get into it, but don't let me ask questions. And obviously we'll make time for questions at the end. And I will do a bit of a double team with Dale and Bashar. So I'll do the first bit, setting up expectations. I'll turn to Dale and Bashar to talk about the structure and the work of the working groups, and I'll maybe come back and take on the next steps. But questions throughout. So let me just begin with the ask that I'm going to make of you, obviously, to engage in this building journey, which for me, I think, as I said, has more significance this morning probably than I even anticipated it would. We're building something new, something that does not exist in both in the Northeast and in the West. And as we build this something new, this singular structure, this new thing, I guess my ask is of you to be bold, to be courageous, in the act of building it, to model the culture you want to see continue in the entity that you're designing. And in very challenging, and I want to acknowledge that, and difficult times personally, for you to be selfless. And I'm gonna spend a moment and go through each of those concepts a little bit. So Randy, if you go to the first next couple of slides, I don't know whoever's driving.
Sharon's driving today.
Okay, I think I've done that part. So I've done that part too. So let me unpack each of these ideas. This new thing, this single thing, this singular thing, this integrated university. What is that? And I want to be crystal clear on this point because there's, as you'll see, not a huge amount of time, and it's not going to be helpful if we continue to debate first principles, and these are really they. So let's just get our arms around this. We are building something new, and that new thing is this. It's a single accredited entity, right? We're in each of our regions. We currently have 3 entities, each of them accredited by Middle States. What we're building is a singular thing that will be accredited by middle stage. It will have a single leadership team, a single faculty and staff, a single program array, a single enrollment management strategy, a single combined budget, a single reporting relationship to the chancellor, to the board of governors. It is a new university. That is what we are building. In our case, A plus B plus C does not equal A and B and C. It is something new. And what that means practically, I think for you in your work, but you're going to do this work and you're going to become the experts quite quickly. And I will look forward to learning from you. But I think what you're going to find and what I am going to ask is that you assume in everything that you do, you assume that the default setting for an outcome is a singular function, a single office, a single function, a single leader, a single process, a single policy environment, a single approach. That should be the default setting. And then obviously, as you get into the work in some of these areas, you will identify areas that actually need to be done concurrently, conjointly, right? And that's okay, but that should be the exception and not the rule. So find yourselves debating with one another, not what should be singular, but what should be concurrent and conjoint. Okay. So when I say building something new, this integrated thing, that's what I mean. Are there any questions there? Key slide.
Yeah, Dan, this is
sure.
Mike. I'm on one of your 10 screens probably. Your box to the right there, you mentioned make the case for joint and concurrent delivery models as the exception. I know you sort of touched on that. When I think delivery models, I'm thinking of academic program delivery, but maybe you're talking more broadly than
functionally, organizationally. I'm thinking of any function that one is, because you're going to be looking across a range of functions, and we'll get down to this. You'll see in the list of working groups a comprehensive range of functions that a university fulfills. And I think the thinking here is that assume, for the sake of argument, that everything becomes integrated and singular, and
Okay.
And find joy in the things that you discover ought not to be. But I'm a social scientist, and we used to argue over, there was a single page for the survey design, and you had to argue up questions onto that survey because you had narrow real estate. So in terms of a kind of a optimization principle, I'm offering this one.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. So let's go to bold. This one's super important. And frankly, this is the slide that got me so excited. And I should say that all of this work derives from the preliminary conversations that have been going on at the universities over the last several months through the financial review and then beyond. And this slide rolls up some of the audacity of your ambition. And frankly, this is inspiring to me. What we're talking about here is not just building another public higher education university, right? We're talking about reestablishing our affordability advantage. The language that I've seen coming out of some of the work is, let's reduce the price. Let's not think about containing costs. Let's reduce the net average price we're charging our students, right? Let's set aggressive, ambitious student outcome goals. Not like 1% a year bullshit persistence improvement. Let's go for 10 over 5. Let's put ourselves into the top quartile of our sector, right? Let's not talk about addressing opportunity gaps. Let's eliminate them. Let's not talk about containing enrollment decline. Let's grow enrollment. Let's stop cutting faculty. Let's grow our faculty in line with enrollment. Let's tighten even further the connectivity between our educational programs and our career outcomes. And let's think about career services with respect to the performance they deliver to our students. I think NPS is a net promoter score. And these are ideas that are beginning, and I've only seen this done, I have to say, and I've spent a lot of time in and around higher education. I have only seen this done a couple of times. It's a rare exception. We're basically saying, let's build our university for our students. we have an opportunity to build new. Let's build new and let's meet our students where they are. Let's identify their needs and serve them. Let's not try to take them and pour them into our construct. I saw this done at Paul Quinn College. I saw this done at National Louis, particularly on affordability, where those universities redesigned themselves fundamentally around the price they believe their students could pay, not on what they think they could get in tuition. That is, to me, this is our opportunity in this slide. And of course, we're going to ask you to go back and to sort of create realistic goals as opposed to these aspirational ones. But be bold. Don't be shy. There are a lot of forces out there which will grind us back to mediocre, and we will fight them. So let's talk a little bit about seeding a new culture. And it's certainly something that I've observed. So the next slide, next slide. And this is something that I've observed since, I've been here. We and, increasingly, given our circumstances, we are in a very divisive place in our system, in our commonwealth, in our nation. Again, I think with this morning, with a greater degree, a sense of urgency than maybe ever before. We have an opportunity in this work to redefine that culture as we work with each other and others who we will integrate into our thinking and our work. We have an opportunity to establish new norms, the norms that we want to see emerge in the cultures of our new universities. And here's, again, some of the, just captured some of the thinking that was already emerging in the early conversations in the two regions. Let's be student-centered. Let's not just talk about being students. Let's put the student right in front of our design. Everything we do should be for that student. Let's design for equity. Right now, we try to adjust our practice to improve, to make outcomes more equitable. What if we design for equity? Transparency, this fourth one, this is going to push us. How do we move with agility and speed and still respect the culture of shared governance? Right? We are so tied to our meeting schedules. We don't have 3 years. Trusting, it's a tough one. Inquisitive, curiosity, bias for action. And you'll add others and maybe amend these. But be conscious that in doing the work, we have an opportunity to model who we want to become. We used to talk about strengthening our culture. I think actually it's more a matter of inventing a new one. And then finally, let's go to selfless. And I want to honor and acknowledge, if you go to the next slide, I think it's still there. This is difficult. And I just want to, call out why, as we move to integrate, we're going to be streamlining how we manage to deliver functions. And so there's a personal aspect of this, which is very challenging to live with. And I want to call that out, and I want you to be able to talk about that openly, because it is a source of anxiety. And it is not, I think, advantageous to contain or repress it. We will do everything we can to develop talent and to support our most precious gift, asset, our people. But this is still, from many, if not all of you, a time of significant uncertainty. And so I want to be able to say that out loud to thank you for that selflessness. To ask you to have courage. If possible, find joy. And think broadly. It's an opportunity that very few of us will ever get, to think outside our lane, if you come into this as a communications person or as a finance person or as an academic manager, to think broadly about the university as a whole and how it orients towards students of the future. So think broadly. So those are the big asks up front. Just draw a line there, and then we'll get into some of the detail. I just wanted to pause for a moment. Any questions? Okay. Hearing none, let's go into some of the detail. Next slide, then. The process that we're engaged in, I mean, you've seen that before. That is the process as defined in Act 50, defined in law. It's intended to be all those things: deliberate, analytical, consultative, transparent. Began with a review of all of its limitations. It was really just a paper exercise to see whether the hard work, which is about to begin, has any likelihood of some success, at least on paper, with respect to financial outcomes. Now the hard work comes. What does that new entity look like? How does it work? That's what happens now between October and April. And then the hope is to bring plans to the board, not for action, but by bringing plans to the board in April, triggers a public comment period and potential board action July. So that's our timeline. It's quick. But then there's a long period of building, assuming the board approves a plan. The implementation lasts well over a year or over a year. And the idea is that a new entity enrolls its first cohort of students. And we'll come back to this in August 2022. So it's a long path, a long journey. It's almost 2 years. And we're in the second detailed design phase with deliverables and timelines established in law. Okay. Next slide. So let me go a little bit into the expectations of working group leads and working group members, expectations of you. And so let's dive into the next slide. So we talk in terms of the critical path. We're going to ask you to help us define the critical path integration. What's that mean? And the way we're asking you to think about it is within your group, within your area of focus, ask yourself, what must be in place by August 2022 when the new entity enrolls its first cohort of students? What absolutely has to be there? Not everything has to be there. What has to be there? And when does it have to get put in place on the course to August 2022? So, and the thinking derives from others who we're speaking to about integration and how to do it. Kind of start with that end in mind. New entity launches. What has to happen? You have to be able to enroll students. They have to be able to package their aid. They have to be able to enroll in courses, right? What else has to be in place? Sort of identify the priorities in terms of what needs to be there on that date, and then what's left and how can that be sequenced over the next while. So that's what we're defining as the critical path. And we've started a list of things here you can see. And this is early thinking, so you'll take this and dig into it and add to it and develop it in a way that's sort of specific for the group the functional area that you're working in. But this is critically important if we're all doing this, because then we'll be able to see what the dependencies are, and we'll be able to prioritize in a way that will allow us to launch a new entity successfully in August 2022. Okay, so this is not, just to be clear, this is not the critical path. This is a starting point. It's an early draft. There's some early thinking of what we know is coming up along the way. And we're inviting you to help us. flesh that out. Anything there? Questions?
Hey, Dan. This is Dave Garcia from CalU. With the
Hey, Dave.
good morning. With the RFP for the student information system out there, and the call to action for whoever is selected for us to be on that same SIS system, what role would that play into this timeline?
Yeah. So I don't know if Rose is on, but I think I remember, and Sharon, if Rose is not on, you can correct me where I'm wrong. I think the RFP, the responses should be back by March, April. So we don't have the information that we need today to make a determination about what to do with respect to the OneSys. There's a variety of options. And the critical pieces that we're missing is basically how much does it cost and how much work does it involve to go down whatever path emerges from, or paths are available to us as a result of the RFP. So we'll know sometime in, April-ish what our options are, and we will choose. So just to be transparent, and this is the way I think about it. So I'm not sure this is necessarily the way. This is the way I think about it. We should make that decision with a couple of criteria in mind. One is cost, and one is workload.
Yeah, because I was coming from the perspective of course registration, billing, things of that nature that might rely on the SIS system. So just a thought.
Yeah, you have to integrate systems in order to launch. You need to integrate systems, and then the question is, what's the cost of doing it? And frankly, how many times do you want to do it? If we go with a OneSys solution, we'll do it once. If we come up with some kind of patch, we'll end up doing it twice. So, but we don't have enough information. Does that make sense? We don't have enough information to make that call at this stage, but we will. When we get the results of the RFP, we'll know what our options are.
Okay. Thank you.
And again, so and I've said this, when I say publicly, I've said this to the presidents in our weekly meetings. My priority on the OneSys is our integrating universities. Yes, it would be nice to have a single student information system across the system because we could do a whole bunch of things we simply can't do now. But it is absolutely critical for our integrating universities.
Hi, Dan, this is Rosa. Can I just add to what you said? Sure. So the RFP is on the street. And as Dan mentioned, we hope to have a vendor selected by the May of 22 timeframe. And assuming we have the funding and the resource availability, the first cohort will go live for August of 23. So it would not align with this timeline. So some type of patchwork or intermediary IT integrations might be necessary until schools onboard to the OneSys.
Great question. Thanks, Dave. Anything else? In which case, let's go to 11. The chancellor had a hand at a presentation when there's two culture slides. So I think, this is and again, this is really wanting to honor the fact that the work we're asking you to do is really hard. And, it is we're asking you to sort of kind of rise above transcend your portfolio and your attachment to your university, et cetera, and to really engage in challenging and hopefully inspiring conversations. But here's some tips and tricks, to doing that in a way which can help to shape a new culture. As you bring yourselves together from across your universities, invite all ideas, be inclusive in terms of ideas. The second one is hard, right? you represent your expertise, not your university. Listening, hearing is important as listening. Obviously, meeting deliverables. Consultation is critical. It's really important to invite people into the process and to engage directly, but also to move with, deliberate intent and appropriate pace. We exist in an organizational culture where the consultation process is, on the one hand, a means of ensuring quality, and on the other, a means of stopping essential innovation. So we have to optimize for the one and mitigate the risks of the other. In that next column, what happens in your group discussions should happen within your group discussions. It's really important to, disagree, debate, discuss, engage, openly, transparently, collegially. But when a direction is established, it is critical that everyone lines up behind it. You do not need to agree with it. But as leaders, you do need to line up behind it. And there just can't be, conversations that take place outside the room, which goes something like, well, I was leaning in this direction, but Bloggins convinced everybody else. That's destructive. Obviously, use data, your best analytical capabilities. If there are solutions out there, grab them. Don't recreate. Time is precious. Your time is precious. And obviously, as we'll go, you'll think of not just the impacts on there are 8 other universities in our system, but what you may also need from them to support your success. So, constantly keeping that perspective on how what you're doing and thinking impacts other universities, or maybe places some demands on other universities to act in ways that enable you to proceed and succeed. And, as you go forward, you will develop your own working group norms and expectations. Hold each other accountable for living into them. This is something we try to do in the executive leadership group with the presidents. It's hard, takes time, getting to know one another. It's awkward sometimes to call people out and say, hey, that's a little outside the norm, but you can do it collegially, respectfully. Help each other kind of establish and get to these norms. And I think it'll make the work better. And then just the next set of tips and tricks. This is, so you remember those aspirational goals from the very early slide. This is just kind of a set of principles that kind of reflect those goals. As you're developing recommendations, you're inevitably going to be trying to decide between competing options. Put the student first. Optimize around these kinds of principles which reflect our goals. And there's intention between them, inevitably. Okay, I'm going to turn over in a second to Dale and Bashar to go through the working group structure and the membership process and stuff like that. Before I do, any questions on what's been, any other questions, issues?
Dan, this is Matt Satine at Edinburgh.
Hey, Matt.
Hi, I'm just wondering, is there a point where we burn the ships and don't go back? I mean, I feel like there's still a lot of resistance to this idea, where we need to just make a statement that this is the direction that we're going to everybody, instead of this dancing around the identity conversations that we're having right now.
So maybe say a few more, say a little bit more about that, Matt.
Well, I just feel like we're working towards this one university But we keep going out to the press and saying Edinburgh is still going to maintain its identity, which really, I understand the purpose behind that, but it's almost impossible to do if we're moving towards one university. You know what I mean? I feel like we're talking out both sides of our mouth.
And I have a concern about that as well. I know the intent is to maintain the identities, but I also know that what evolves from this process may be different than that, or we may be maintaining identities, but not necessarily in the way people want them to be maintained. So, Dan, can you talk a little bit about your expectations for maintenance of identity and tradition?
Sure. And I think I've said this before. I think we're going to learn through this process what identity is. I've been explicit about my hypotheses, and we'll test through this process whether they're true. I do not believe that people identify with a school because it uses SAS or Banner.
Mm-hmm.
I've never heard anybody say that. I actually don't believe that people identify with a school because it's accredited by Middlesex.
Mm-hmm.
I don't believe it. I do believe that people have strong affinity for association, whether that's through an alumni group or through a sporting team or through it, right? I think people have a strong affiliation to place. There was that great piece of research, series of publications about a decade ago about our kinds of comprehensive universities, public, master's level and public universities and colleges as stewards of place, and so I think that and the engagement with the community is absolutely critical, right? But we'll find out. And I think one of the things that I think is one of the most interesting and also most challenging is to begin to identify, to unpack that word identity.
Mm-hmm.
I'm almost confident people don't look at org charts and the stuff that we spend a lot of time thinking about is not what. And you look at some of the NESI data. That's not what people think about when they think about their alma mater.
Mm-hmm.
They think about people. They think about teams. They think about friends. They think about they think about externships, whatever.
Tradition.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess I hear what you're saying, Matt. I don't believe it's I think it's kind of a false dichotomy. I don't think it's an all or nothing proposition.
Yeah, I'm kind of in agreement about that because I don't think anybody chooses a school based on the president at that school.
Right.
But when your president continues to leave, it does become a point of conversation, right?
It does. Leadership turnover is it's totally true, and it's obviously I know very has been historically the last decade or so true at Edinburgh, and it's part of the culture, and it's actually part of the culture across our system because leaders are seen to turn over at regular rate, and staff and faculty do not. It's fascinating, yeah.
Dan, can I jump in?
Yeah,
This
go ahead,
is
Mary Jane.
Mary Jane from Bloomsburg, and I share the concern that Angela and Matt have just raised about the identity. I know that we have said from the beginning that we're going to honor our identity and respect it, but I do think people look at universities and select universities based upon their heritage and their history and their traditions and their identity. I actually see some analogies here with the reorganization that the Catholic Diocese has gone through in Pittsburgh. They have consistently over the last 5 years consolidated parishes under a new name with the retaining the original name as a campus. And probably eventually those names will go away. And while it is exciting to build something new, the reality is we're not like setting a shovel to the ground somewhere in the middle of Pennsylvania because there's going to be I think there's going to be a loss. If you're talking about one entity, there's going to be one name. There's going to probably be a new name. And while you may build forward with creating new expectations and new experiences, and all the wonderful things that were on your slide, that we've just gone through, I do think that we're going to be moving away from what we have built up over the decades and years for our own universities, and that's. I think is going to be a loss. So I think we have to recognize that. And it's that history and heritage and tradition that oftentimes is the foundation for our successful fundraising. For the alumni who said, I met my spouse at Bloomsburg at one of our buildings, and so, I think we have to acknowledge that.
I think I agree with you. I don't necessarily agree with the proposition that we're building towards a new name that will consume the identities of the underlying. I just don't.
Okay.
I don't. I can point to examples of it not happening. If this is so important to us, I believe we have the creativity to figure this out. I mean, there are other approaches we could have taken and did not. Georgia, Texas, they basically took the shovel. I mean, they didn't actually move the facilities, but, University of the RGV used to be Pan American and Brownsville. And in Georgia, all of the consolidations had new names and that is a path. People go down that path. This is not that path. And I do think it's actually one of our greatest strengths and one of our greatest advantages. It is also a challenge, but I think I agree with all of you that our identities are features, not bugs. And we would be imprudent to jettison them. That's my personal view. And there are ways to do that with naming, and there are ways to do that with accreditation. Look, you're already, all of you, something University of Pennsylvania. You just are. And the University of Pennsylvania doesn't really matter.
As I think through the generation of students that will be enrolling, for many of them, their identity becomes what it is based on the major that they're seeking. And that's really where they gravitate toward a university. The adult who's trying to earn a degree is more concerned about, can I get that degree? Can I get that credential? It's going to advance my career. And I understand the value of tradition and the value of history, but we have to think about this in the lens of 25 or 30 years from now. Because what we're building is not for us, because most of us will not be here. It's for our children, our grandchildren, and what they're concerned with and where they're going to get to. And one of the things I'll always advocate for is that we protect the past, we honor the past, we don't denigrate the past to validate the present or the future. But we have to look at the future in a very, very different way than what we're used to looking at, which is predominantly what have we always done in the past.
Yeah, and I think it's important also to recognize that to that point, when I talk to students about this, if they get over, their first question is, are we going to merge the money in the SGAs? Which is the right question for them to ask. You start talking about the programmatic potential. And they go, oh, you mean I can access all those business courses over there too? That's like their heads explode on the screen. Figuratively. It's powerful.
If we speak with the filter of our students and say we are agents for positive change moving forward to sustainability. So if we stay focused on that which you don't want to let go, and the chancellor's telling us, I don't think you'll really be letting go of that, that will probably always be there, that someone met their spouse on this campus, or that this campus was known for accessibility. Those pieces will always be together. We just have to build a team moving forward, and in a positive way.
Yeah, and JD, thanks for that. I mean, I should also say, when you speak up, introduce yourselves. There's 111 of us, so I mitigated the introductions. So I knew we only had an hour and a half. That was JD Dunbar, who's the chair of the Council of Trustees at Clarion. Hope I got that right. I know I did. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think, and I, actually, this goes back to one of these cultural points, and I'm just going to be totally transparent with you. You know, there are a lot of bumps along this journey. I mean, there are any number of points of failure, probably more points of failure than any project any one of us has ever engaged. I don't even want to think about them. I do think about them, but I don't want to think about them. And they're there. I mean, they're there. That's our life. That is our organization. That's our culture.
And could I ask another question? This is Mary Jane Bose again from Bloomsburg.
Thank you.
I noticed that on the slides, there was no reference to the existing debt of the various universities, but I think that's going to be a pretty heavy burden on the integration process moving forward. I was wondering if you could speak to that.
Yeah, I mean, we weren't there. We'll get to the working groups in a second, Mary Jane. We were not using this meeting to go into the detail of any of these things, whether debt or athletics or what we do at the bookstores. It is a critical issue, and you'll see in the working group structure that the working groups are structured in a way that will enable us to look after those kinds of issues. There are any number of issues that are, again, critical, and there are many points of failure. I want to own that and acknowledge that. And I think the choice and what I'm asking you to do is to lead through that. That is a choice. It is a choice you will make. There are ways to lead through that. Some of them more productive than others. We have to build a followership around a plan that makes sense. Or we could reverse that, build a plan that makes sense and build a followership around it. And be willing to pressure test that critically, objectively. Anything else on the overview stuff? The good news on debt, and you all know this, is that none of the debt is any of yours. It's all of ours. It is today. It will be tomorrow. In any construction, unless we dissolve the system, in which case we'll spend all of our time figuring about how to assign the debt to institutions which are spinning off, which is, I think, why Westchester never succeeded. All right, let's move into some more of the detail. I'm going to turn over to Dale and Bashar. As you know, Dale and Bashar, I've asked them to kind of lead the work with their president's colleagues in the Northeast and West, respectively. So I'm going to turn over to you both on the working group structures and practices.
Good morning. Thank you, Dan. If we can go to the next slide, please. I'll start and then ask my colleague Dale to chime in. And please, as the Chancellor said, feel free to interrupt at any moment on any slide. But I want to say two things before we talk about the details of the working group. Much of our conversation with the Chancellor, with the 5 other presidents, focused around how do we place student success front and center in everything we do. And if there are 3 types of working groups that we came up with. One type is parallel working groups that are Northeast focused and West focused. For example, academics. There will be a working group in the Northeast that will focus on all of the academic affairs entities. And there will be a comparable group working in the West focusing on the same thing. So you can see that there are 10 parallel working groups that have been established. The leads for all of those working groups have been communicated with. I'm happy to tell you that all of the leads and co-leads have accepted to begin the work. The second type is regional specific working groups. In conversations, there are some areas of difference, but not of different focus. The focus continues to be what's in the best interest of our students and their success. And then the third type of working group is really an inter-regional working group, where one working group will work across both regions in order to arrive at a common entity. We believe accreditation is one that's critical. The chancellor alluded to middle states. All 6 of us are middle states accredited. The plan forward is to create a single accredited entity in the Northeast and a single accredited entity in the West. The important piece here, I think, and the chancellor alluded to it in the conversations about naming, those are things we can talk about and discuss with middle states and try to make sure that the preservation of tradition, including names, can be part of that conversation. Financial aid, again, this is not about awarding dollars to students. It's really looking at the compliance and regulatory sides of financial aid, so that it's a common process across all of the universities within PASHE. So a common working group seemed to be most appropriate. And this is one where we may learn some things. Back to the chancellor's comment regarding how it might impact non-integrating institutions. There may be some efficiencies of scale. There may be some opportunities where we look at a broader way of looking at compliance and realizing additional efficiencies. And financial aid is one of those areas where we have to be open to such opportunities. I think the chancellor mentioned, and Rosa added some commentary regarding state system technology. And this is really about the one SIS conversation. The RFP is on the street, as you know, and we have far more questions than answers right now. Affordability, how the integrating entities can integrate technology at an efficient, affordable, yet incredibly stable way. So lots to talk about there. And then finally, human resources and labor relations. We in the Northeast have been working very closely with our colleagues at Mansfield, where it's really a single human resources office that's serving both institutions. We've been sharing services there for some time, and we will continue to do that and broaden that to include our Lock Haven colleagues. And labor relations, we all have the same collective bargaining agreements across the entire system. So it seemed most appropriate to really channel that effort as a single entity. Dale, let me shut up there and please add your typical wisdom to my rubbish.
So this is Dale Pearson from Clarion University, for those of you who are seeing me for the first time. We thought that human resources and labor relations was so important that we put it up there twice. But actually, we were discussing how that is really going to cross both processes. And so that really is an important issue. I'd like to recap a couple of things that the Chancellor alluded to and also my colleague Bashar just discussed. We have now moved into the planning stage. And so this is what this work will be for the next few months. This work will result in recommendations that will be put forth, but these are not final decisions. And so as recommending working groups, that's going to be an important concept for people to navigate and think about as they're putting forward their work. I would like to talk a little bit about what was alluded to before about identity. Yes, we're going to go through major grief and loss as we change some things, but we will keep many things as well. The integration process is going to take us, even though we may have start dates of 2022, and then we will backfill all the work that needs to happen to get there. It's a 3 to 5 year process. And so we would imagine that our identity, old and being developed and new, will be morphing over time. And I think we need to honor and respect that. Let's go to the next slide. The working groups, membership and processes. Now, we have leaders who have been asked and stepped forward to co-lead the working groups. The working groups were put into motion because there are specific things that a university needs to do to run its business and to consider as it's going to build a new entity. So the new U has a university leadership team, and then we have our co-leads in our working groups. The university leadership team builds the working group membership, and we are looking at our matrix of skill set, subject matter expertise, constituencies who must be represented, and the number of representatives. The shared subject of shared governance consideration appoints, they look at appointment, invitations, nominations of the working group. And then also we will share information to support the working groups and their leads' ability to provide updates to the working groups and also the working group members in fulfilling their responsibilities to update the constituents. So communication is going to be very important as we navigate through this process. This is not going to be a light lift. Our co-leads in each of the 14 working groups will build build subgroup membership matrices, again, with skill sets and so forth that need to be represented. Now, let's just take a real practical example of that. We're looking at financial aid, and that's going to be a cross-disciplinary group between the Northeast and the Western region. Individuals are hired and put into these, not hired, but are placed into these groups because they have expertise in financial aid or related information. The individuals in the working groups are not there to represent Bloomsburg University. They are there to represent the Northeast new university expertise that's being built. So you have your subject expertise, and you have to think broadly across 3 universities, and indeed in the financial aid case, 6 universities, and even beyond to 14. So that's the co-leads of the working groups are going to think very differently from any task force or committee they've ever been on before. And that goes back to what Dan was talking about earlier, suspending judgment, using your expertise, being inclusive, and building. The working groups will collaborate with the university leadership team, and they will appoint or nominate subgroup members. So what this means is we've got 14 working groups or so, give or take, that we've listed up there. And these subject area groups will also be appointing subgroups that are specific to the needs of the working group. We have some areas, student development, student success, and so forth. We've alluded to the importance of career and how those students who graduate need to be able to successfully navigate their life and move through their careers. Well, there may be a specific group that's identified to work within the context of just career development and what we offer across the region and across the system at large. So always keep in mind, you're working within your current university, you're developing a new university that will have regional and PASHE-wide and regional beyond ramifications. The lead of the working groups will also be sharing information and we have different processes that we're putting in place. There may be some variation between the Northeast region and the Western region, but that's okay because we're going to be updating people on a regular basis. And so, and then Bashar, would you like to fill in anything I've left out? You're on mute.
Sorry. No, Dale, you did a great job. Thank you.
All right, let's get to the next one. Oh, this is one of my favorite slides because this slide has changed and morphed and moved in more ways than one. If you look in the center, we've got our boss, the chancellor, and the lead presidents and the Office of the Chancellor support. If you look straight down, we've got our Baker Tilly support. We've not really mentioned very much about Baker Tilly. Baker Tilly is a group of individuals and an organization that have a massive subject area expertise that they will be able to give to the working groups. And each group will be inviting the Baker Tilly representatives to their working groups to discuss their subject area, how they can contribute, how they will support. And so in some cases, we may be doing the deep dives to get information for what we know, but they will be assisting us and they will be talking to each of the working group leads about how they will be doing this. We also have Shelley Nickel, who was very heavily involved and a former president within the Georgia system. She is an integration expert. She understands much of what happened and how things rolled out. And as a president, the consequences of an integration, because she actually had to live with a new institution and lead it. And so those are some of the support that we have. And then we also have the Office of the Chancellor support. I'll talk about the Western region, and then I'll give it back to Bashar. So in the Western region, I have the support of both Jerry Jones and Gui Yu, and we are working together and leading our 3 institutions currently and communicating to our cabinets or our executive teams and our council of trustees and our alumni and so forth. And then we've got a project manager who's Kelly Moran from Cal University, and then Susan Fensky will be our quality assurance and quality assessor through the process to make sure we're tracking, we're moving, we're meeting our deliverables, because we've got a pretty rugged timeline moving forward. The working groups, you're all here today, your co-leads, and then you will be creating your subgroups. Some may have as many as 4 or 5 subgroups. Some may have just 1 or 2. And then the accreditation piece is central to everything because that's how we map. So that's why we put it across all systems. And what do we have to do to be an opening, credentialed, accredited university? And as we move forward and working backwards from there. Back to you, Bashar.
Thank you, Dale. In the Northeast, the box at the top there is myself with my 2 colleague presidents, President Patterson and President Pignatello from Mansfield and Lock Haven, respectively. Project manager is Amanda Biddings, who is in the office of the president here at Bloomsburg. And our quality assurance, quality control lead is Associate Vice President Eric Ness from Bloomsburg. They'll mirror the same roles and responsibilities that Dale mentioned for the West project manager and quality assurance colleagues there. And then we'll have our working groups. One area where I think it's important to point out our academic affairs working group. Dale mentioned 3 or 4 sub-working groups. I think academic affairs in the Northeast may be an entity that will have more subgroups than any other group. And that should not be unexpected. That actually should be music to our ears, because we're in the business of providing education to students. And I think we want to make sure we are looking at and addressing every part of the academic enterprise and landing on a common single program array across the region that gives students multiple pathways to earn their degrees, regardless of where they start and regardless of what they want to study. I think one of the things that's, in my mind, most exciting about this is creating opportunities that right now don't exist for students of the region and beyond, and identifying new opportunities that right now none of the 3 entities in the Northeast offer, that through market analysis tell us that we might be able to grow our enrollment. The power of 3 here becomes far more impressive than the power of 3 individual entities. Happy to take any questions on this. I think we're ready to go to the next slide, unless you have anything else to add, Dale or Dan.
One thing, Bashar, I'd like to add, I think from you, I'm so glad you brought up the academic array, because one of our Council of Trustees students was so excited when they found out that they might actually get to take some specialization courses that they did not have the opportunity to take here at Clarion because we had to cut that position several years ago. We've been in recession management for so long that we've been in the strategy of just trimming down, trimming back, cutting this, cutting that, to the point where we really are all pretty lean organizations. And that's really not right for our students. the ability, and then the faculty got all excited about the idea of, oh my gosh, I'll have colleagues in my who have a specialization in my field that I can now consult with or work with in the new academic program structure, however we create that. So the opportunities to not have to keep cutting are so hopeful, and it gives me a sense of inspiration. And so, of course, there's a lot of work to get there, but still, I wanted to just talk about that for a second. Okay.
Great. Thank you, Dale and Bashar. Let's go to next steps. So that's a lot. And we wanted to give a sense there is some concrete steps, some concrete things that we need you to do. And I know there's already a lot of energy, and there's already a lot of thinking and a lot of work. And so really what we're going to try to do here, and with help from the supports that Dale and Bashar have outlined, and help from our colleagues at Baker Tilly, is to try to channel some of the energy into constructive setup and focused work that can use our time effectively. So, the first bit, and you'll see some dates to the right, is really just set up the working groups and get them set up in a way that's constructive. And it's going to take a little bit of time. It's another week or so, but it's critical time. It's a little bit of go fast to go slow to go fast. But getting the sort of foundational structures in place. So so we're asking folks in a way that's just been described. Let's figure out who needs what kind of expertise do we need in these groups. How do we get them in there? Let's go through our charters so everybody in the group is clear about what it is we're focusing on. And we have draft charters for groups, and we'll be circulating those to look at. To establish consultation paths. Who do you need to talk to routinely? How? When? And how does the working group consultation process integrate with others, right? So you don't all want to be touching down on the same constituency group, do that in a coordinated way. So getting that stuff up and running in the next couple weeks is going to be absolutely critical to the effective work of the group going. Substantively, really, and again, these are the issues we want you to focus on in this order. Really define that critical path in the area that you're looking. What needs to be there in August 2022? What must be there in August 22 for successful launch, right? And so that will begin immediately to focus your priorities, and then go back to those goals and set aspirational goals. Where do you want to be by 2026 in the areas that you're looking at? What will success look like? And then what few measures? You don't want these vast numbers of vast dashboards, but what are the few things you're going to be looking at, periodically? So establish a clear set of goals for 2026, measures to assess your progress in getting there. And then using these two lenses, I guess, what really needs to be there by August 2022, and what are our goals longer range? Now it's possible to filter and prioritize and begin to develop some draft recommendations for some of the key questions that you'll be addressing that will define your future state. And in some of the materials that are going to be circulated, you'll see a bunch of stuff will come out over the next little while, over the next week or so, charters for your working groups, some key questions that we want you to address yourselves to within your areas of focus for the working groups. And that's really what's referenced there. And then as you begin to sort of put these things in place, you can begin to think, okay, this is what needs to be there by August 2022. What can come after August 2022, and in what kind of space? So we're really trying to structure and channel the work so that you get to the key pieces. The key pieces are the ones that are going to enable successful launch in August 2022 and set you up to achieve the goals that you'll be setting for the functions that you'll be looking at. So those are the concrete starting places that'll get us through into the new year. A lot of the work that follows on from that is going deeper into detail around the paths that are developed in this process. Does that make sense? Critical slide. Okay. And in the meantime, and this is work that I know many of you are already doing, get to know one another. It's good. actually get to know one another and get to know the practices and the processes and the assets that exist across the three universities that you're looking at. So it's, get to know each other personally, but also get to know each other's institutions. You'll be getting some invites from Baker Tilly, some of our supports, to begin to schedule kickoff working group sessions to put in place the supports, the tools, the templates that you need to get the work done. Begin to schedule a regular cadence of meetings. That's kind of where we're thinking of going. And then, I don't know if there's another slide. Yeah, that's a horrible slide.
It's the scary slide.
That's the scary slide. So what we've done here is all of the kind of things that we've asked you to do in the working groups is there kind of with the red boxes, and then we've surrounded the work that you're doing with board meetings and accreditation stuff and all sorts of excitement. I don't know, Dale or Bashar, if you wanted to add a color commentary, any of that.
Well, as a former school counselor, I would not have used red, but that was not my call.
Yeah, good catch.
I for those of us who are detailed oriented, this pulls us back into the actual timeline and the project and the deliverables and gives us a sense of scope of the project. So I think this will generate some questions. Some people might have questions immediately, but I encourage people to ask questions to the different regional leaders in the next days to come, because now that we've gotten the charge, we're creating one university. We've got to figure out the roads to getting there and all the one this, one that, and so forth. There'll be many questions about how we do this work, and that's going to be specific to the Northeast and the Western regions. We have a lot of things in common, but we want to respect our regional differences as well. One thing I wanted to also say is, the different projects that we've got in the West, we're really working on lifting up our online initiatives, and that's going to be exciting because that's going to create a new market for us that we've already have aggressive leadership in, but we need to be even more aggressive. And so that's going to give us an opportunity to expand to the needs of the Commonwealth in the Western region. And the Northeast, they've got a slightly different mission. And I think those will play out in our deliverables as we go forward.
The only thing I would add, if I may, is it does look like a lot. It's a heavy lift. But as we talk about here internally at Bloom, I think we're going to rely on our leads and co-leads to chunk this, to keep an eye on August 2022, but make sure the milestones that they, back to the earlier slide, but the milestones that they set for themselves are critical, because I think those are the paths to success. And whatever that looks like, we need to make sure, and I sound like a broken record, so apologies. We need to keep the student and their success front and center in every conversation we have, regardless of whether you're working on the human resources and labor relations or academic array and everything in between. We exist to serve the needs of the students of the Commonwealth, and we need to continue to do it in the most affordable way we can. So that would be my only addition to what the Chancellor and Dale said, to recognize it is about the students.
As you populate your working groups, keep in mind it's very important that we have diversity, inclusion, and equity represented on every group and every task force, every person. The initiatives of our emerging demographics in the state are also very important to consider going forward. I also want to caution the big picture and the detail folks and everyone who's in between. We have to focus on what we need to get done by April 1st and focus on what we need to get done by 2022. There's going to be many things as the new universities are created that we will want to do in the long term. But for now, we've got to be pretty focused on our deliverables.
So I have two questions. This is Ron Darbo from Lock Haven. So one is we're about to get into Thanksgiving and then very quickly into December. Most of us are restarting the spring either in late January or very early February. And with the very sort of truncated timeline, I wonder if we've given thought to how we engage, particularly people in the subgroups, and I guess in some cases the subgroups, how we engage them over the break so that we can move the work forward. That's question one. And then question two is, a lot of this we're talking about quite rightly, placing students forward. And there's obviously a space where, our faculty and our staff and or the stakeholders are going to be integral parts of conversations. I wonder how much of the slides, how much of this information I think will we have available to share to stakeholders across the board.
So I don't know, Adele Bashar, if you wanted to take the first part, and I can take the information sharing one if you like.
Sure. Ron, you really, your question is incredibly timely. We've had conversation with the chancellor and his team about the break that will be occurring at Thanksgiving, and then it's probably closer to a 2 months break. I think what we're going to see in that period is probably multiple things happening along the continuum of the work groups, where colleagues who are 12-month employees are going to probably be knee deep in their working groups, and the subgroups within the academic arena where faculty are critical. I think we need to make sure that our chairs who are technically under contract are engaged in the work and invite other faculty to be part of the conversation. I think beyond that, I think we have to have a more probably robust conversation with all 6 schools to make sure we're landing at a place that's consistent for our faculty as we ask them to participate in these working groups. So I would say stay tuned, but at least the groups really need to be populated with all of the competencies that are needed to be in place. And I would also ask that we think about it from a diversity, making sure that all of the working groups are populated with diverse colleagues to bring that diverse thinking to the conversation. Stay tuned on the other part. I think it's going to be a delicate conversation regarding contracts.
Thank you.
And then on the communications part of this, I don't know if Cody is on or Randy, but I can hum a few bars. So we're going to be obviously creating, and others can chime in here. We will be sharing information as it's available. So we'll try to be driving, folks to a website that we'll maintain here at the Office of the Chancellor. And so the slide deck that we've just presented, there will be an announcement. I guess I'll make as soon as this meeting is done, saying this meeting has happened and some of the material is available, and driving folks to the website who want to look at it. I know that the teams are building their own ways of sharing information. So our goal here is to be as transparent as possible, with information as it's available, and just being a little careful. There's to be sure that a lot of there's always a delicate balancing act to sort of how much of the sausage making do people really want or need to see. So we'll be trying to work with that as well. But everything you've seen today will be available instantly. When your working groups are formed and the matrices are developed and the charters are done, that will also become available.
Dan, if I may,
go ahead.
I'm sorry.
No,
if I may, Randy and I were chatting while you were talking. I think this slide deck, once the minor corrections are made, will be available to everybody on the call, or at least the leads on the call.
Thank you.
I think one thing I'd like to add as a caution is the communications you send out and transparency is very important, but you are also going to be dealing with decision-making, confidential information. conceptual issues that are going to be concerning to many of our constituents. And before we get to the exact plan, there'll be many conversations around that. You're going to be walking a very fine line of balancing transparency, communication, and gossip. And so everything you say as a leader will be quoted and probably misquoted. So it's important to remember those things going forward. It's just a reality of the world we live in. And I also know that you are going to be tapped because you are leaders. People will want to know from you exactly what is going on because you'll have the inside scoop on things. And that's a fine role and it's an honor and a privilege. And with it, there's a heavy amount of responsibility that we have to consider going forward.
Dale, if I may, the only other comment I'd like to make is each of the 6 integrating institutions have designated university spokespersons. And Cody in the Chancellor's office is working closely with our communications team. I think what we would like to make sure, you're going to get media inquiry because that's just the way they are. Please refer all of those to the university's spokesperson so that it can be coordinated effectively. Because in reality, they will poke at you, trying to get you to say something. And again, I think being coordinated here is so critical, especially in all phases, but especially in these early conversations.
So I put in the chat a little prematurely. At moments like these, I'm minded. Some of our presidents know me enough to know this, that of the Battle of Agincourt, which was fought during the 100 Years' War between England and France, and the English find themselves in 1600 in Normandy, grossly outnumbered by the French, 10-1, and it informs a speech, a beautiful speech, St. Crispin's Day speech in Henry V. I think it's Act 3 or 4, and I quoted from it. I apologize for. Unfortunately, Shakespeare was not didn't have the kind of gender sensibilities that all of us do. But the power of the word resonate with me. This is a lift, both in terms of the intellectual and emotional and cultural, but it's one that I don't think any of us will ever have the opportunity or want to try again. But it has we have a profound opportunity to reshape the public higher education, not just for the Commonwealth, but for the nation. And goodness knows we need to. So win, lose, or draw, and I do not intend to draw or lose, and I know you don't either. Thank you for everything you're doing, everything you're about to do. We will, as we move forward and get going and put the supports in place around you and the work, let's stay in touch and keep truing up around our practices. We're launching out with the best possible design in mind. We may find that it needs to evolve, and we'll evolve with it. Anything else?
Yeah. Dan, this is Mike from Edinburgh. I couldn't let you go without yet another question, but thinking of and looking at some of the slides where what we're doing in this period up to April is putting together the integration plan, which is also a series of recommendations, but also thinking about some of the earlier discussion about really a timeline to have a successful launch by fall of 22. Just thinking about the academic side, there are going to actually have to be decisions about program array, what the actual academic programs are going to look like. I mean, we don't need 3 versions of an English degree. We need an English degree. And also what the delivery of those are going to be. I think beyond recommendations, some of those decisions are going to need to actually be determined by spring, because if the marketing and communication folks are going to be, and the recruitment folks are going to be actually recruiting starting in fall, they're going to need to know, what it is we're actually selling. And digital and paper copy would have to be created and all of that, which I don't think can wait till, the July board meeting. So I just wondered, about, we're putting a plan together, but at the same time, in some sense, already making some of the decisions to implement.
Yeah, I think I think putting in place the contingencies in case the decisions are taken, right? I mean, and it's hard to be more specific with that. I don't know, whoever's driving, if you want to go back to the critical path slide. That is why this critical path slide is so absolutely critical. That one of the first things we're asking you to do is to just look at the timeline, and in your group, Mike, which would have to do with the academic program array, to fill in things like that. Then here's an issue. We need to address it. What's the thanks, Sharon. What is the what are we going to do about it? I don't have an answer to your question. I understand your question. It's actually come up before. We need to get that onto this map, as it were, and then take those decisions. Yeah, because we need to equip you to enroll for next year with a view of what the following year could look like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll figure it out.
It's a leap of faith, but I have it. Yeah. And there are others. I mean, we've mentioned Shelley before. Shelley's gone through this in Georgia. There are others who have gone through this. We're not entirely alone. And so as we have these specific questions, we can take them to others and just gather their experience. And there's a lot of it out there. In some ways, I've said this before, I wish we got started 5 or 6 years ago. In some ways, I'm glad we didn't, because now there are other experiences that we can draw on as we go forward. And there wouldn't have been 5 or 6 years ago.
Is it possible, Dan, that at some point, when it's easy for you or the state system to do so, you can share with us everybody who is in this group? So if you just share our names, just so we have it and contact information for each other, so that we can begin the team building process.
Yeah, no, that's great. Actually, Dale Bashar, this is a group of all the leads and co-leads. Is that?
Yes. Yes. And
100%.
And the chairs. And
yeah,
I'm sorry. And the chairs of the council of trustees of the 6 institutions.
And there are a few cabinet members as well.
Okay. Are we at 100% of leads and co-leads?
Yes.
So yeah, I don't see any reason we can't share. We're going to anyway put the membership, the working group membership matrices up once they're available, probably in about a week or so. But we can share in advance.
One thing I'd like to mention, over the next 4 to 5 days, the co-leads are going to be extremely busy putting together, refining the charges, putting together their working group schedules and so forth. So the next few days are going to be really busy. But once that information is out there and their processes roll forward, people will be reaching out and connecting and doing all those things so that we can all work together. I asked if, because it looks like we're closing, if we could put the slide back up, that not the busy slides, not the question slides, just these. We have so many guiding principles and expectations, but really love this slide, Dan.
Yep. There is opportunity here if we have the courage to reach out and grab hold of it. It's great. Well, I really thank you, Dale. Thank you, Bashar. Thanks all of you for your leadership. It's truly, these are historic times. And I'm excited about, working with you. I'm excited about seeing the work that you're doing. It's tremendous. It's important. Thank you. Look after yourselves. This is a marathon sprint. Take some time for yourselves. Dale, Bashar, any final thoughts?
Put on your running shoes.
And somebody jokingly said that, Dan, you now refer to it as Dale Bashar Dale as one. I think that's
hashtag Dale Bashar.
We are spending a lot of time together. And it's my pleasure. I find joy in that aspect of the work.
I just want to thank everybody for stepping up. I know you've already gotten several full-time jobs that you have under your and ready for the spring semester as well. But I want to thank everyone for offering to be leaders in this. This is critical to the future of our citizens of Pennsylvania.
Ditto. Very well said.
All right, everybody. Have a great day. Enjoy and thank you. Bye now.